Thank you, John. Good morning. How is everyone today? All right. So I want to thank you for welcoming into this sacred space today. It is truly an honor to be with you and to be back here in Prescott. My husband and I attended here years ago. We left about 13 years ago to go back to Phoenix. And unfortunately. And so today I'm here to share something deeply personal and deeply human and also deeply spiritual. So this morning I want to invite us into a conversation that we don't always allow ourselves to have openly. And a conversation about loss, about grief, and about that proverbial elephant in the room. And that so often lingers in unspoken in our communities, our families, and even our own lives. So, and yet the truth that I want to ground us in today is that even in our most painful experiences, we are never outside the love and presence of Spirit. So the title of my talk today is Grief, God, and the Creative Process. So we all know about Dr. Ernest Holmes, our founder of Science of Mind, and that and his ideas of the creative process. Now this topic is important because grief touches every life, right? And whether we speak of it or not, I know this community has experienced many losses, and I've known those that have passed in this community when we were here 13 years ago. And at some point, each of us will experience loss, whether it's death of someone we love, whether it's the ending of a relationship, whether it's something that maybe our loss of health, or a loss of identity, or a chapter that we thought would last forever. And so, and yet grief is something our culture leaves us feeling isolated, that our culture doesn't often avoids the topic of loss and grief, right? And we don't address it because it's like I said, that proverbial elephant in the room. We don't want to talk about it, and we don't want to experience it. We don't want to share it. And when we do that, people are left feeling isolated in their pain and unsure of where Spirit really fits in to this whole grief process. So bringing grief into our spiritual conversations reminds us that faith is not only for moments of joy and happiness and abundance and prosperity, but also for those tender moments, those confusing moments, and those heartbreaking seasons of life. So when we make space for grief, we make space for deeper compassion, for greater authenticity, and a fuller experience of the presence of God, exactly when we need it the most, right? So as we are reminded, there's no place where God is not, even here, even now, even in grief. So in our tradition, I talk about Science of Mind, in our tradition, we often speak of wholeness and peace and joy and abundance and prosperity and all those wonderful qualities that we all have the ability to tap into. And all of that is absolutely true. And these qualities are the essence of Spirit itself. But we are also human. And we can't escape grief. We can't escape loss. The ending of relationships or the death of a loved one. We can't escape it. So when loss comes, when death comes, when changes sweep through our lives like an uninvited guest, then we feel pain. We hurt. So sometimes we're cracked wide open. Sometimes our faith trembles. Sometimes the silence feels unbearable. So, and still, even in those cracks, even in those trembling silences, Spirit is there. So Rumi reminds us, grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally and your life's search for love and wisdom. Isn't that beautiful? So 3 years ago, January 14th, my husband Dave passed away. And some of you might remember him when we were here 13 years ago. We were part of this community for a while. And we were married for 40 years, a lifetime of love that began only 2 months after we met. And we were married for 40 years, and we met in May and got married in the end of May and got married the 1st of August. So 2 months. No, we met, yeah, that's right, end of May. So, and the rest of the marriage was laughter, adventures, ordinary sacred days, but also challenges, like everyone experiences. So when he died, the days that followed were filled with everything that you might expect, with that shock, heartache, brain fog, exhaustion, waves of pain that felt unending. So Vicki Harrison reminds us that grief is like an ocean. It comes in waves, ebbing and flowing. Sometimes the water is calm, and sometimes it is overwhelming. And all we can do is learn to swim. But grief is never just emotional. There are also practical things that demand our attention. The phone calls to return, the appointments to cancel, the financial matters to attend to, and then there are, sorting through belongings. And some of those things can be surprisingly easy, and then others are a little bit more difficult, like, parting with personal items, like souvenirs from travels that we went on. And so I wasn't ready to part with those, so I didn't. I still have them, some of them. And that's something I want to pause and emphasize today, that there is no timeline in grief. There's only your own rhythm. Healing is not a race, and Spirit is patient with us. What often stops us from healing our grief is not a lack of strength, but a lack of permission. Many of us were taught that, either directly or indirectly, that grief should be handled quietly and not out in public. We shouldn't talk about it. We should kind of brush it under the rug and just kind of keep it to ourselves, right? Because if we talk about it, somebody's going to say, well, you need to move on. You need to get going with your life. You need to do something about it. And it might not be your time to move on with it. So sometimes we even believe that feeling our grief means we're doing something wrong, or wrong spiritually, or though sadness is a failure of faith. Fear can also keep us stuck. Fear of being overwhelmed, fear of that letting ourselves feel fully, we might never recover, or fear that what life will look like if we truly accept what has changed. When grief is suppressed, judged, or rushed, it doesn't disappear. It just shows up in a different form. So I like to say we need to move through it, not around it. So about 5.5 months after Dave passed, I was sitting outside Courthouse Square in Prescott here at the 10-year memorial anniversary of the Granite Mountain Hotshots. I'm sure you all remember that tragic day in 2013 when 9 brave firefighters lost their lives. And at the memorial, a young man, just 16 years old, got up to speak. His father had been one of the hotshots. And the last time he saw his father, he was only 6 years old. He spoke with such incredible courage. Mind you, he's 16 years old. He spoke with courage, such openness about the last time he saw his dad. And then he said something that I will never forget. He said, you can be better. No, you can be bitter or you can be better. I choose to be better. I choose joy. It's like, whoa, dude, he's 16 years old. Maybe I need to learn something from this young man. So the words were so simple, yet so profound coming from this wise teenager. It was, in that moment, something shifted in me. It's like his words were not just about healing, but it was like his personal mantra. And that day I felt clarity arise. It's like, well, if he can do it, so can I, And so knowing that that was my life's path, it just opened up to me that that was my true calling, that I needed to help others going through grief like he had just helped me. And I will never forget that. And someday I hope to meet him one day. So that moment, though born in sorrow, was also a moment of profound spiritual awakening. In religious science, we talk about the creative process that I mentioned. Spirit, soul, body, or we might think of it as thought, law, and manifestation. It's the movement of the divine energy from idea into form. So this process is not reserved for just joy and abundance and clarity. It's always at work, even in grief. So when Dave and I first found CSL Prescott, it wasn't by coincidence, because I don't believe in coincidences. Spirit led us here, preparing us for the journey ahead. And I believe for him, it was his journey beyond this life. And for me, it's for what my path is now. In the early days of loss, I couldn't see any of that. My vision was pretty clouded by tears, but slowly my questions began to shift from, why did this happen? To, well, what can I do with this? From, will I ever be whole again? To, well, how can I serve from this place? So Ernest Holmes reminds us there is a power for good in the universe, and we can use it. Sometimes that power flows through joy, but sometimes flows through tears. Sometimes through surrender. Sometimes through the cracks in your carefully constructed lives. We often think of grief as something to get over, something to overcome. But what if grief is not the enemy? What if grief is a sacred companion? Some refer to death as the enemy, but in our teaching, we recognize that all life is eternal, spirit expressing. Death then is not an ending, but a doorway, a transition, a change in form. And so we often refer, when someone has passed, that they made their transition to another form. Spirit does not step away from us in sorrow. Spirit steps into the tears, into the silence, into the aching emptiness, into the moments when we feel we cannot breathe. Holmes also said, Spirit can only do for us what it can do through us. So grief is not one of the ways Spirit works through us. Grief is one of the ways that Spirit works through us. It awakens empathy. It expands compassion. Into the aching, it shapes the person we are becoming. Pain carves us out to make more room for love. So what do we do with this understanding? We begin to soften our relationship with grief rather than trying to conquer it. We allow ourselves to listen instead of resist, to meet sorrow with curiosity and compassion instead of judgment. We use this awareness to create space for honest feelings, for reflection, for prayer and presence, and for trusting the quiet movement of spirit within us. Rather than asking grief to hurry or disappear, we invite it to walk beside us as a teacher, revealing what matters most, reshaping our priorities, and guiding us toward deeper connection with ourselves and with one another, and with God. In doing so, we open the door not only to healing, but to transformation, a healing that unfolds gently in its own time and always held in love. So, as I mentioned, Dave and I we met before Memorial Day weekend in 1982, and we were married on August 3rd. Our honeymoon took place in Greer, Arizona, in the snow. I had never skied before, and after the bunny slopes, Dave coaxed me into the real runs. We were out in Sunrise. And one night we decided to go night skiing. Snow fell softly while we were there, and so we headed back to our cabin in Greer. Our source of music in the car was, we had a choice of the radio, which out in the middle of nowhere, you get nothing, or cassette tapes. Am I showing my age? So radio was not an option. So now he put on one of our favorite cassette tapes, one of our favorite bands, and he forwarded this song, this really interesting song that had these extraterrestrial sounds to it. And well, I'll just say it was Pink Floyd. And then we're on this narrow 2-lane highway. The snow is falling. It's cloudy. There's like a moon behind the clouds. He turns off the headlights. And I'm like, he goes, "Are you scared?" And I go, "No, I trust you." And playing this Pink Floyd music. And it was amazing. So fast forward 4 decades later, after he died or made his transition, I was sitting on the edge of our bed looking at his pictures and reminiscing about that night and how absolutely beautiful it was with the snow falling in the dark and the Pink Floyd and all that stuff in my 1979 Camaro. I was like, try driving that in the snow. Yeah, sorry. And and I still talk to him every day and say, "Hey, doing this, doing that." Anyway, I stopped for a moment and said, "I'll be right back." And I needed to take the recycling out to the curb and then also check my email on the computer. So after I came back inside, I went to my computer real quick, and I unlocked my computer. Immediately, my Apple Tunes came on and started playing that song. I've never played that song on my computer at home, only on my phone. And all I could say was, "No way." So why do I share that story? To remind you that grief is not just sorrow, that it also is threaded with mystery, and that with treasures, with moments of spirit that whispers through synchronicities, through signs and memories. And if there's one message I hope to carry with you today, is this: you do not need to get over grief. You're invited to grow with it. Grief is not a detour away from life. It is a part of life. And when we allow it to shape us, to deepen us, to soften us, it often gives rise to true purpose. Purpose is not found in ignoring. Purpose often rises from within it. So I invite you today to trust the process. Trust your path. Trust that even here, now, Spirit is with you. And in closing, we do not grieve without God. We do not grow without God. And we are never alone. And so I want to end with this quote I found by Gary Zukav. "The energy of everyone you have ever loved is still with you." So I end with that. Thank you for allowing me to share this space with you. And now we'll go into prayer. Thank you. So there is one life. That life is God. That life is the infinite spirit that exists in all things, all beings, all possibilities. The infinite presence that is in the seen and unseen, the visible, the invisible. From the clouds in the sky to the stars beyond, all the way to the center core of this earth. And everything in between is God. God is filled with mystery. God is filled with that love and joy and peace and calm and surrender. And God is also in that grief and that eternal life. It is all God. And what I know of God, I know of myself and everyone here today, that we are the divine expressions of that God. The divine expressions of truth, of love and joy and peace. As we are, God lives in, through, and as us right here, right now. And I'm so grateful for this truth, knowing that God is here. God is that presence. That in every situation in our lives, whether it is loss, whether it is the death of someone, the loss of a relationship, the loss of a home, the loss of finances, a change in family status, that all that is God. God is in that moment. God is in all of those moments. And we seek to find peace and joy and love in those moments, and not to ignore them, not to push them aside or brush them under a rug or hide them and keep them silent. Those are the moments that God, that Spirit is with us at every moment. Just as God is in the trees and the clouds and the sky and the moon, the stars, and all of that, God is in our hearts, in our grieving hearts, at every moment. And that we have the ability to tap into God's gifts. Sweet Spirit being with us at all times. And I am so grateful for this truth. This truth, as we know that God is here, God is with us, that God walks with us in every moment. And it is in those divine moments that we can experience God's presence. That joy, that peace, that calm that is forever with us. And with great gratitude, I release these words into the action of universal law, knowing that it is already done and it is so. That life is eternal. Peace is with us. Spirit walks with us. Even in those moments of grief and loss, God is still here. And I let it go and I let it be, and I say God, yes to God. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you. Amen.